Hello, everyone. My name is Ida Linehan Young, and I'm here with Ed Olford. Myself and Ed already did an interview about this book here, The Room at the Top of the Stairs, and now he wants to do some questions and answers about this one. If I cry, I'll fill the ocean. So, welcome, Ed, and thank you so much for doing this. I know you're an avid reader, and you've sent me lots of messages about If I Cry, I'll Fill the Ocean. And you visited the graveyard in North Harbor and things like that. So, anyway, take it away and thank you.
Happy New Year 2025 is here. It's great to see we're starting off on a right foot, left foot. I'm not quite sure. We'll see how it goes for the new year. And you forgot to mention that I had the distinct pleasure and honor. And if I get a bit emotional, the tears may flow, but I think that's healthy too, because they're healing tears. I got a chance to meet your mom and get a hug, and that was an honor in itself. So I didn't know the book. I think I might have heard some rumblings about the book coming out there, but I wasn't quite sure. But I met her at the mall, I think was when I first met her. And it was the smile on her face I'll never ever forget. So yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to talk with you about the book. So let's jump in. And of course, I think the thing that everybody is always asking about any book, the title, If I Cry, I'll Fill the Ocean. What's it based on in a general term? We may cover it in some of the questions, but what's it based on?
It's actually a saying that my mom had. And when I brought her out to North Harbor on the 40th anniversary of the house fire, on the way back, it was during the pandemic, and we stopped into a restaurant on the way for a takeout because we weren't allowed to go in there. And we were just kind of talking a little bit about, that day and things like that. And I asked her, I said, Mom, like, how do you feel? She said, I could cry. She said, sure, I could be crying my lifetime, but if I cry, I'll feel the ocean. So she said, I can't do it. So that's where the title came from.
Powerful. So, Catherine Power Lenahan, tell me about her. I mean, like I said, I've had the honor of meeting her and the small that would, like I said, melt your heart. But at the same time, I got a hint that was like, don't mess with me because I could make life interesting for you. Not in a bad way, but I could make life interesting for you. Who is she besides your mom?
Well, like she was ordinary in to us because we grew up with her. But you're right, you didn't mess with her. Like she wouldn't be long giving you the boot if if you messed with her. So there was that. But I mean, she was loving and caring, and to the grandchildren and the great grandchildren, she would. There was nothing she wouldn't do. Like she had just had such a great relationship with everyone really. Like she was just well liked. um I don't know anybody that didn't like her. Maybe I wouldn't know, but she was just an ordinary human being that overcame extraordinary circumstances.
I think you might have alluded to it in the book, and if it's a spoiler alert, so be it. We'll just let people know. There's one story you told me about. She was doing the laundry one time, and you guys were having a game. It was soccer or softball, and she dropped everything, and she was out the door with you guys. Is that my memory good on that one, or
Yeah, no, sometimes yeah, we didn't call it laundry. She was washing clothes and you put it out on the line. And we were only young, but oft times, if it was a beautiful day, like there was 10 of us out running around the yard, plus whatever was in the harbor, coming up the harbor or down the harbor, was there as well. Like there could be 60, 70 youngsters out in the yard all the time. And
oh
I'm
my?
serious because everybody had like 10 children, 8 children, 9 children, and our place was central. And so sometimes if there was a nice day, she'd be in putting, clothes through the wringer washer or something. And next thing she'd be out in the middle of us and kicking the ball and like the people didn't mess with her either. Some of the big young fellas, right? Like we were playing with me, 17, 18-year-olds, and some of the big young fellas, I'm telling you, she used to take them out. So she didn't mind. But she loved it. Like she'd just drop everything and come out and play, which was nice because that wasn't like it wasn't typical. It wasn't like
Exactly.
now, like you didn't play games or stuff like that, but she did. We often played Yahtzee and stuff like that, and that wasn't really common, but she did have take the time to sit down and play with us.
I'm going to ask you to take me back now to June 1980 and your mom. What what happened in June of 1980?
Well, like I can't tell you a whole lot about it because, as you know, I wasn't there for a lot of it, right? I guess I was there on that day. So the house caught fire in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I know that because that was the time that the watch burnt on my arm. It stopped like on my arm at that time. So that's how I know the time. That's how I think everybody kind of got the time out of it. It was daylight. It was a beautiful, beautiful morning. There wasn't a lap on the harbor. We were right next to the harbor. There wasn't, it was just a gorgeous sunny 5 a.m. and our house caught fire. So, like mom and dad, we had an old fella living with us at the time. And 2 or 3 nights before that, he'd gotten up and like he was a typical kind of older gentleman that had a job to get from his bedroom to the chair. Like he always had to be tended on and everything else. And even to put his clothes on, mom used to have to help him. But this morning, like 2 or 3 mornings before that, he got up and got dressed and went down to haul up his dory. Like went out through the gate and she heard the door. So she got up and she caught him before he crossed the road. Anyway, she got him to go back to bed. And when he got up again at 8 o'clock, he still, he couldn't get dressed or nothing. So
Wow.
anyway, she heard a noise that morning and she thought it was him again. So she got up and looked out and he wasn't there. And she looked down, he was downstairs. So she looked down and his door was still closed. So she figured he was still there, but she heard something and she wasn't sure what it was. There wasn't a sound, like there was no smoke or nothing like that. So she heard something and it sounded like crackling. So she went in and got dad and told him that she thought the house was on fire, and she said she don't know where that came from, like because it's not something that you'd think.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Exactly.
two of them went downstairs, and there was still no sign of smoke, but they could hear the fire somewhere. So they left in to try to not left, but they scattered throughout the house to try to get us all out. Like she came upstairs, and Dad went and got the old fella to get him out. And
Wow.
like by the time it was a tinderbox basically, and by the time someone opened the door and someone beat out the window, like it just raged through the house. When you think you got like lots of time, you have seconds. And that's basically it.
Exactly.
Like you do have seconds. You think you have lots of time, but you have seconds.
So she lost five children.
She lost 5 children. I lost 4 brothers and a sister. So
And
the 3 youngest died, and 2 of the older boys.
may I ask their age?
10, 12, and 14. So Barry was 10, Harold was 12, and Sharon was 14. So I was 15 at the time. We were like 18 months apart, and Richard was 19, and Francis was 21.
And I think she almost lost the sixth one.
Well, that would have been me because I was in the hospital for months and months, but probably a little bit too stubborn to die.
Wow, I commend you. So I'm going to ask you because right above you, the one we're talking about, which is I'm honored to say I've got a copy of too, and it's a cherished copy. But also over to the far, well, to my left, over here, it's no turning back. So that's your interpretation, if it's fair for me to say, of the fire.
Yes, so I wrote that book in 2014. So it's over 10 years ago now. Wow, I can't believe it. Yeah, so I wrote that book and it was like it was meant to be a story of how a community survived in light of such a tragedy. But as I started talking to people, I realized that nobody really had survived. So it ended up being my story simply because I started writing it and I just kept writing it and it became my story. And I think that was the catalyst to help the community survive was putting out that book.
So what's the connection? I mean, there might some people say there's an obvious connection, but what do you think is the difference between your book and your mother's book?
Well, I lost a sister and 4 brothers, but she lost 5 children. Like,
Almost a sixth child.
yeah. So when I kind of didn't know the depth of her loss until I had children myself. And like, unless you're in that position, like her half of her family was just wiped out, and
And
she
not only, if
didn't
I can
talk
interject,
about
not
it.
only that, she also had to deal with the fact that, I mean, we can all analyze the death of a child. I mean, I can't, as a father of three children, I can't go there. So if it's okay with you, we'll sort of switch over a little bit if you don't mind, because that's why I think the tears were starting to fall. But she lost five children, but she also had to deal with this sixth child. You, Ida Linehan, was in a hospital. So how torn was she? Because you got to do the preparation, you got to do the planning, for the lack of another word, the organizing of in a small community. I'm not being disrespectful to North Arbor, but we're not talking about St. John's or Gander or Grand Falls. We're talking about North Arbor, Newfoundland, which population what? Maybe
There
300?
might have been 150 people lived there then, but
Wow.
most of them were kids, right? There might have been
Okay.
like 10 families, and most of them were children. So
So she's planning the funeral for five of her children, but she's also got a child that's in the hospital. I mean, because I read No Turning Back. Again, I read that without crying. I made a promise to myself that if you can survive, then I can read this book without, even though they're right there on the back of my eyes right now. So she had to plan funeral for five of her children, process the fact she just lost her home, process the fact that she's a mother who's also got a child in the hospital. Don't know if she's going to make it or not. How? How do you think she got
I
through it?
think you're assuming there was some processing going on at the time. Like, I doubt very much that there was. Like, she would have been in shock. Like, there was, she last time say she couldn't remember, certain from one. She could remember the big things during those days, like ending up in the church, but like who brought her there, she didn't know. So there was like different things. She had to show up, of course, and it was like I would liken it to her being in shock, and not even being in her, like in her, I would say, like an out of body experience, not really out of
Definitely.
body, but like your mind is not connected to
Yeah.
anything that's going on, because to make the connection would have been like brutal. So it was after the fire that she came to see me. It was long after the funeral and stuff like that, because they had no vehicle. It wasn't like now. Everybody don't didn't go and sit in the hospital with you all the time, and they had no vehicle, they had no money, they had no, like, they were trying to rebuild, and they had five kids in the graveyard, and it was just a lot, and a lot more than a lot of people will be able to deal with.